Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Administration Act and Innovation Act. I believe we're going to be having a cloture vote, procedural vote on that this evening, and I'm pleased, and all early indications are that that will pass and we'll move forward on this bill. This has been considerable time in the making. It is one of those pieces of legislation that has gained bipartisan support, both in House committees and Senate committees, and it's moving through what I would call a regular process. We haven't seen too much of that in the last year and a half or so. This is a regular process, and for those who say Congress can't get anything done, hopefully, with passage of this bill, we will have taken a very significant step forward in terms of being able to provide and bring to patients, doctors, administrators, and others across the nation new drugs, new treatments, new medical devices that can ensure better health, prevent potential terminal situations, and better drug availability and device availability to American citizens. So I think it's very important that we go forward, and I'm pleased that we've gotten to this point on a bipartisan basis. I think Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi deserve commendation for their work here in the Senate, and of course those in the House, and bringing the bill along on a parallel track. The whole idea here is to continue to provide the safest, most effective, and most efficient drugs and devices for American citizens and citizens around the world. The two very important industries where the United States have been the leading edge of providers, and we don't want to lose that. It's meant a lot to our economy. It's meant a lot of jobs for a lot of Americans, and passage of this bill will continue, I think, what has been a remarkable nearly 3 decades worth of innovation that has taken place both in the biopharmaceutical industry as well as the medical device industry. Now, part of this bill deals with this situation of drug shortages. I've talked to a number of doctors. My staff has been traveling the state talking to medical providers, and there's been an alarming number of drug shortages in critical drugs, particularly those designed perhaps to deal with more rare instances of health problems, yet obviously important to those people who are suffering from those incidences of disease or health threat. It's been reported to me that that FDA last year received a record number of drug shortage reports, more than 250, including critical drugs used in surgery, emergency care, and oncology. And the problem continues today, but there is legislation in this bill that addresses that, and hopefully will move us forward significantly in terms of dealing with this current problem. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, my hometown in Indiana, Parkview's health pharmacy director said nearly 80% of hospitals consistently face shortages in drugs needed for emergencies, including cardiac and diabetic prescriptions. And this bill incorporates significant reporting requirements to the FDA that I hope will help mitigate this critical problem. I think it's going to be ongoing, and we're going to need to figure out ways to further address this, but this could be an important first step. Now, the whole concept here has been somewhat unique in the federal government. That is, the makers of the products essentially pay a fee to the regulatory agency for the regulatory agency to conduct the work necessary to gain the approval for them to sell their drugs on the market. We've had a situation here which is sort of a cornucopia of new innovations in drugs and medical devices, yet that have been delayed by bureaucracy or the inability of FDA to move in an efficient, effective way to run this through the process and put its stamp of approval on it. And so the biopharmaceutical industry has basically said, look, we're willing to put up either between $3.5 and $4 billion in new user fees. I believe it's over a 5-year period of time. Fees that will account for nearly 60% of the funding designated by the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. In exchange for putting up those fees, FDA has agreed to new performance goals and process improvements that will reduce the time for drugs to reach the market. So the key here is to provide the funds necessary to hire the right people and put the right procedures in place to expedite the study of and approval of safe, effective, efficient drugs that have been sent to FDA for approval so we can get them into the market. And of course, the goal here is get them not only into the market, but using them to provide health and safety benefits for people. The Medical Device User Act is also part of this. In Indiana, we not only have a large, very large biopharmaceutical company and a number of affiliated companies, we also have a vibrant and dynamic medical device industry. That industry employs over 20,000 Hoosiers directly and many, many more indirectly with good paying jobs. And many of these companies are right on the leading edge of new innovation and new development. Included in the legislation that will be voted on is a 5-year agreement known as the Medical Device User Fee Act that improves the regulatory pathway for medical devices. This is the medical device equivalent of the pharmaceutical user fee. The device companies have worked with FDA, again, in an agreement which each side contributes. Medical device manufacturers will contribute user fees to go to the FDA that can be used to streamline, not compromising safety in any way, but to streamline the regulatory process so the approvals can be made. Why is this important? Well, not only getting these products into the market so that they can be used to improve the health in a safe way of our American citizens, but this is a dynamic export industry, and America has been the leading exporter of medical devices. I have heard from so many medical device manufacturers throughout Indiana that they're faced with a dilemma of having to potentially think about moving overseas simply because of the delays and the bureaucracy and the time lapse that exists for approval, where they can manufacture these overseas and get the approval overseas and sell it on a worldwide basis much more quickly. They don't want to do that. The United States is their home of origin. They want to produce here, but they have to compete with their competitors across the waters, and they are subjected to a lot less delay in implementing their approvals. And so to counter that, we simply want to use these medical device user fees in a way that will help the FDA review process and eliminate these unnecessary delays, unpredictability, and inconsistency of past practices. I do want to thank the FDA for paying significant attention to our device users by coming to Indiana, listening to them, a forum that I convened. There's been interaction back and forth, whether it's FDA traveling to Indiana or device manufacturers traveling here to Washington. And I'm pleased that within this bill is the result of all those negotiations and all those exchanges between the two. Let me just mention one last thing before closing here, and that is the medical device tax. That is not part of this bill, but as part of the so-called affordable health care bill that was passed, a 2.3% tax to pay for some of that bill was imposed, which will begin in 2013. That tax essentially was imposed on an industry that is paying its full share of taxes, contributing to the user fee, and yet was slapped on as a way, I believe, to pay for the health care bill That has an enormous impact over a period of time on these device manufacturers and jeopardizes manufacturers' ability to remain based here in the United States rather than looking overseas. There's a number of states in addition to Indiana, and a colleague from Minnesota is waiting to speak. I don't know if it's on this, but her state also is a major manufacturer and innovator of medical devices. But California, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin will all suffer potential job losses if this medical device tax is imposed. We're not taking it up in this bill. It would obviously potentially derail the bill. An agreement has been made that it would be set aside. I know Senator Hatch is looking for, on our side, is looking for an opportunity to bring that up at another vehicle, and I want to support that. I encourage my colleagues to take a look at the impact of that fee on our ability as a nation to be the leader in innovation and export of medical devices. With that, Mr. President, I again want to thank Senators Harkin and Enzi for shepherding the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act through the committee. I think this legislation will help improve patients' access to new medical technology. It will protect American jobs and improve the FDA so America can remain a global leader in biomedical innovation. And I encourage my colleagues in the Senate to support this important legislation and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I thank the Senator from Indiana for his words. We both are from states that have a lot of jobs involved in medical device, and in fact,